Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ice Cream for Everyone podcast. This is Willem Vanderhorst, your host for the show. It's been already a few months since the last time I published. It's been the rest of summer, essentially. So I hope you had a fantastic summer. We're already well into fall, and time flies, essentially. There's been a lot going on, and I'm going to ramble a little bit and tell you a little bit of what's been happening. So I had a few different trips over the summer, which were fantastic. I ended up quite unexpectedly spending a few weeks in Europe. So I caught up with friends in England and in France, with friends and family and with my nieces. I had the chance of going on a road trip across the Alps. So the mountains keep calling to me, and I'm looking forward to the skiing season. I've received some brand new custom skis that I'm extremely excited about, which is going to be the topic of our next episode. Actually, not this particular episode, because I had a conversation with the small ski crafts and manufacturers about like where do you start to design skis, and I thought it was a really interesting change of topic to go to craftsmen rather than how do you design? It's object design and a sports and performance object design, and talking about skiing, but that's not the topic right now. This particular episode coming up is it's pretty random actually. And we talk about it a little bit at the beginning of the episode. My guest is Jack Riback. A few months ago already, because time flies, and I apologize to Jack for the amount of time delayed between the moment we recorded and the moment I'm publishing, but I met Jack while listening to jazz at the Green Mill Lounge in Uptown Chicago. So the Green Mill is one of the really famous spots to check out, and very famous particularly for jazz, also known because it was a hangout for Al Capone back in the day. There's a few photos of him on a booth behind the bar. And there's always like amazing jazzmen and women coming to play and sing at the bar. So it's a really great time, fantastic spot, and highly recommended. I mean, it's big on the tourist trail anyway, so you'll probably look it up if ever you visit Chicago, but I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite spots to go regularly listen to music. And happened to strike conversation with this man who was on vacation and had been to Chicago in a while, and started telling me a little bit about his story, and he seemed to be really fascinating. So I invited him to join the show. I also have to warn you in advance, and I apologize sincerely for that. I really hesitated even publishing this episode at all or truncating it. I've edited as best as I could, but we had some technical issues before we started recording, and I ended up calling Jack on his phone, and I probably will avoid doing that again in the future as much as I can, because that came out to be like very uneven in terms of quality. So overall, we can hear him pretty well, and I think this story is really worth listening to. But at times it's a bit garbled. I've done my best to be able to save some of the sound, but it's a bit garbled at times. There's a couple of beeps that I've mostly removed. But just as a fair warning, I apologize for the quality of the sound. It's not at its best. However, the quality of the story is fantastic. So Jack grew up in, he started out in advertising a long time ago with GDB in Chicago, and then created his own series of businesses. So we talk about creativity and entrepreneurship, creating your own business. And there's a certain point in his career where he was called by Disney Studios to be creating a new department called the Department of Strategic Alliances. And he goes into the behind the scenes of what happened there. And the most interesting story I find, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stories, and particularly the one he finishes with in creating cards and greeting cards and stories for children in hospitals. But in the meantime, around the middle of the episode, talks about the behind the scenes of brokering the deal between Disney Films and McDonald's to have their toys in Happy Meals. And that was just really fascinating. I absolutely loved it. There's like insights about the corporate world, fun anecdotes. And that's often the kind of things that I really like to feature on this podcast, is really interesting people with inspiring stories that have something to share and that are worth listening to. So that's about it. Just a couple of things about me before we go ahead. As usual, so I'm going to be working on redesigning the website. It's long overdue. I'm sure I've mentioned it before. I have a couple of more episodes of the podcast to be editing and publishing in the very short term. So I'm going to be soon publishing the episode with Folsom Skis, that are the people who made my brand new skis that are coming up. And, let's see what else. I'm also no longer working with BBDO in Chicago. So I'm currently looking for another contract. If ever you need any support from a branded marketing strategy standpoint, whether you are an advertising and marketing agency or PR agency, or you're a client looking for support from a brand and strategy standpoint. You're not exactly sure who you're talking to, who your audience is, how to communicate with them, or those kinds of questions. Don't hesitate giving me a shout. I'm going to be working on a little bit more details to what types of services I'm offering, particularly for clients. So if you have a direct business, why would you hire a marketing strategy consultant such as me? Or like, why me in particular more than another one? So that's something that I'm working on at the moment. And otherwise, in terms of the show itself, as usual, all the published episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. I think they're mostly referenced everywhere. I'm going to double check. If you enjoy the episode or if you enjoy the show, it makes a hell of a difference if you share it to other friends, or if you post a rating on Apple Podcasts, or a review. Even better, a review is amazing. I'm going to start reading reviews. I haven't had a review in a little while, but I also haven't published in a little while, so that might be why. Otherwise, you can find a lot more information about myself or my services on the main website. That's icecreamforeveryone.net. Everything attached, Ice Cream for Everyone. You can also reach out on Twitter. My handle is ICVillem, letters I, C, and then WILLEM. Same thing for the email. It's WILLEM at icecreamforeveryone.net. Don't hesitate sharing the episode, telling your friends, particularly if you enjoyed it. It makes a difference. It helps other people find the show. And I think that's about it for now. Without further ado, here's Jack Riback. Hi, Jack. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. It's great. And this is, we were just chatting a little bit about that before I hit the record button, but it's a little bit unusual. And the first time, it's the first time for you, and it's the first time for me having a conversation based on a random encounter. So it's fun and new for me. So we met at the Green Mill Lounge, a jazz club, a historical jazz club in Chicago a few weeks ago.
Right.
And
I haven't been there in about 20 years. So
you hadn't been there in 20 years?
No, just an interesting encounter for both of us, I guess.
Yeah. So are you from around Chicago, or Chicago in the first place?
I was born in Chicago, but I've been gone. I left I was probably 22, 23 years old, started a business, one of my first entrepreneurial businesses, and was at a gift show. I used to create little books and products, unusual products. You can still go on the computer and find some of them. If you research, you'll see, look up a dancing Nixon box, and you'll see that I used to do music boxes with President Nixon, and he used to tap dance to the tune of It's Howdy Doody Time. They're now collector's items, apparently, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
No, that's cool. We're going to go into this. It's really interesting. Sorry.
Well, most of my products that I started in advertising.
Okay.
And frankly, got very bored. And I used to take paper sample books, which were multiple.
Can I stop you for a second?
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Please.
I just want to dig in, before we go further into this. How did you get into advertising in the first place?
You know what? I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign, and I like marketing. I know I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, so advertising seemed like a lot of fun, and it seemed like a good outlet for being creative. And so I kind of fell into it that way. And
what kind of role did you get hired with? What kind of role? Do you have a creative role in advertising, or?
Well, yes, actually, but I found out, yes, the answer is yes. I was recruited out of, from what I understand, the entire United States. Volkswagen went around and was recruiting somebody to start. They went to every campus, apparently, or I shouldn't say every campus, but a majority of campuses, and they recruited me when we did our final senior projects. And so out of everybody, I was fortunate enough to be recruited by Volkswagen, and that was my first job. And that is, for anybody younger out there, Volkswagen at the time, we're talking the 1960s, was an incredibly creative, probably the most creative product going out there. With Doyle Dane Bernbach was the advertising agent, and they used to run double full pages in New York Times and put a little tiny 1-inch picture of the Volkswagen Bug, and under it would say "Think Small." Was that kind of an advertising company, very creative in its day.
Yeah.
So it was,
and this is a really, really. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but really an iconic piece of advertising. Were you working there when they came up with Think Small, or was it before you started?
No, it was before me. I'd like to think that I had something to do with them, but I really didn't.
Okay.
I was just fortunate enough to be recruited by them, so they thought I was creative enough. But
so
like
you were
so
working
many
at
people,
DDB or at Volkswagen, right? So
well, actually, go ahead. They actually placed me at Volkswagen in the Midwest, and I disseminated a lot of national advertising to the dealers in the Midwest. And to be frank with you, while I really was very creative in my training, and I got excited that I'm going there to do creative work, it was doing this work that I thought was anything but creative that really started me off on my entrepreneurial background, or career, I should say, because I was bored to death. And so that's when not to miss anything, but that's when I fast forwarded to taking advertising paper sample books and started writing little stories to girls I was dating at the time. Like, gee, I'm glad we met, and before I met you, I was kind of lonely, and I'm so glad we met, and since we did, everything became bright and sunny. And I know it sounds a little corny, but these things were very effective, and people started saying, "Yeah, you should do something with these. These are terrific." And I was just
so were they little booklets?
Little booklets. They were actually, at the time, they were 8 pages. When I went into actual production, I turned them into 6 pages for economic reasons. But at the time, I didn't know anything about that business of publishing these little books, and it eventually became an elaborate greeting card. But it was at a time before there was the kind of cards you see out there now. There's so many companies that followed what we did, but we were one of the very first, what they call the non-occasion greeting card. So I talked about feelings, things that people didn't talk about. At the time I did my cards, it was a typical card was a picture of a horse, and it'd say "Happy Birthday, Nephew." It was things like that. Or they were very sappy, long poems. So mine were kind of, for whatever it was, it caught the attention of everybody, and seemed to be a big hit for me. So at a very young age, I struck it pretty good. And at one time, we were in like 18,000 accounts across the United States, Canada. It was a huge success.
Just trying to understand, the little booklets were the same as greeting cards, or not the same as greeting cards, or like bigger?
All greeting cards at the time were 5 by 7. They were vertical. And when I came out with mine, people said, "Oh, you can't do that because it's not going to fit the racks." I said, "Good." Or the displays, rather. And I said, "Good, then they'll have to put them in my displays." And I learned about displays, and we actually created our own. And so when we got them into stores, we were pretty unique in that we had our own section. But at the same time, people would say, "Oh, you can't do multiple pages. People won't read them." But ours were very simple, and people read them. And everything that we were told you can't do, that's one of the advantages of being young. Yeah. You don't know what you can't do, know. So we just broke all the rules, but it was a huge success. I'm only trying to give you a point of reference. I'm not trying to brag by any means.
That's okay.
Because life has caught up with me since then. But
it's okay to brag, and it's really interesting to hear the background.
Well, I started as a 22, going on 23. I started off my kitchen table doing this. Within 9 months, we had done over $2 million in sales, believe it or not. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot in big business, but when you're a little company, and this is back in the 60s, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, so, it sounds like a lot of money. At what point, had you already given up the day job at that point, or at what point did you give up the advertising?
There's really a point. It's interesting you're asking me that, because I've got a son now that's starting a business, and he says, "When do I quit my job?" And it made me think back to my time. A lot of people wonder about
that. That's why I'm asking, yeah.
I advise people not to. I advise my son don't quit your job until you have some income coming in. But there's going to be that point where you're not sure if it's enough, but it shows you that there's potential. So then you have to, in my opinion, just hold your breath and dive off the board and go for it, because you really need to spend full time to make the business work. But I just didn't advise doing it until he had, some indication or some actual cash flow.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. That was in Chicago, and it's everybody says, "Oh, how lucky you made your money so fast." But I have to say, we worked really hard.
Yeah.
And before I left that day job, a lot of this was being done at night, and it just became overwhelming. I mean, we had no idea we were going to be this successful. Stores like Henry Bendel's in New York, Fifth Avenue store, very high class. They took my cards. They've never sold a greeting card, but they took our cards. It was that, for some reason, it just seemed to work for everybody. It was one of those things. It wouldn't work today. Well, it would work today, but there's so much competition that wouldn't have that immediate success like that. But
right.
Anyway, that's how I got started. And one day at a gift show in California, in the middle of January, and again, we were from Chicago, so it was the middle of January, and some people invited me to their house for a barbecue, and we're barbecuing steaks in the middle of winter, sitting outside, and I thought, my God, this is great. Why am I living in Chicago? So I moved everybody to California, and I lived there for the next 20 years, and finished up in California. I stayed with that business, and I did many, many different products. Most of them were creative, but we were kind of a boutique shop. I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but there was a movie called Urban Cowboy that came out with John Travolta, Deborah Winger. And so when you live in LA, you're kind of hip, and I'm saying that in quotes, but we think we're hip. And I knew the Western thing was going to be big, so I took one of the products I did. I took a man's T-shirt, and I went and I took that old fringe that used to be on my grandmother's lamps, if you're familiar with the little frilly kind of trim, and I literally stapled it in a yoke pattern like a cowboy shirt on a regular short sleeve man's T-shirt. And I don't know the first thing about sewing, but to make a long story short, again, in about 6 months, we were in every single female store in America, every department store, the Gap, Contempo, the Limited. So my products took me into more than just cards. It took me into many different areas, including the music box I was telling you about. That actually was, I think it was Time and Newsweek printed my product when I did the Nixon box, calling me a radical toy maker. But overall, I tried to have fun with the products and make people smile, and had some really nice success.
That's great. How did you go into so fast into distribution for, let's say, the T-shirt? It seemed to be a new area for you. You hadn't worked in that industry. You talk about stapling something to the. So yeah, you just had to learn and show your product to distributors, or how did that go? Just curious.
It actually came about where I had heard about sweatshops in LA, and so I went down to a clothing manufacturer I did know. I didn't show him my product, but I said, "How do you get your product?" Well, we get these. These are made locally. I said, "Who makes them?" I mean, I'm looking to do a product, and they were very helpful. And so they really pointed me to a couple of sweatshops. I shouldn't call them sweatshops. That sounds like we did something bad. But these were people that did that, and they told me what I would need to give them, and that kind of gave me an education. And then, ironically, a friend of mine who used to sell fabric, which I didn't know that, fabric to major manufacturers, he saw my product sitting in a bag as I was going to sell it in the gift market. And he looked at it and he said, "Oh my God, this is phenomenal. Take it out of the bag and you should be selling this to clothing stores." And I said, "Oh my God, how do I do it?" And he said, "Well, I know a guy that's got a showroom. Let's show it to him." And literally within 6-7 months, we were all over the United States. It was just very fortunate that my friend looked at it and I'd like to take credit for it, that I created the product, but he was the one that really got us into the big time distribution.
Huh?
So a little bit of luck.
Yeah. Does that account? Do you think there's always a little bit of luck element in a lot of the success stories that you've had in the past?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of luck. I think you have to make your luck. I mean, so many creative people sit around, have a few drinks or whatever they have with their friends, and somebody comes up with a great idea. Somebody says, yeah, that's great. We should do that. And then the next morning, nobody does anything because it's very difficult to really get it from an idea into something real.
Yes.
And you got to be like a detective. I mean, when I started with the greeting cards originally, or the little books, I actually went into a store that had kind of unique boutique kind of products. And I said, where do you get these? And they said, we get these from manufacturers' reps. And I'm not afraid to ask questions, even if it made me look silly. But I said, what's a manufacturer's rep? I didn't know what it was. She said, no, those are people that come and sell. And I said, oh, would there be any way I can contact one of them? And before you're done, you really become a detective and you learn how these manufacturer reps work. And I'm not making it sound that simple because you'd have to talk to maybe 10 reps to find one good one. I mean, there is some sense of being somewhat smart about it all, but you learn the business that way. And it was like that with the t-shirts. I didn't know about fabric, and I didn't know how could I get fringe, for example, the fringe that I bought for the shirts. And it's funny because when I went, I'm jumping around. I hope I'm not confusing anyone, but
no, that's fine.
With the t-shirts, and I remember the fringe, I knew I had to get some fringe. So I went to the store that I had bought that sample, and they said, oh, we don't carry that kind of volume. You have to go downtown to a big company. They gave me a couple names. I went. One guy came out. He said, you want how much? And I said, yeah, I want hundreds of yards of this. He comes out and he's literally blowing dust off the fringe that hadn't been used in years and years and years. And I was fortunate enough to write a contract with him where I'll take all your fringe if you give me a good price. He says, and I had the exclusive rights for his fringe. Well, within 9 months, less than 9 months, he's begging me out of the contract so that he can sell fringe to everybody because the fad became a little bigger than just my product. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying, and I do ramble on, is that you have to be a detective, and you have to want something enough. You have to have the passion and belief that it could work to carry it through.
Interesting. Do you think do you think the principles are still the same from the days that you're talking about to now, with, may it be like new technologies or applications, or I don't know, like people starting businesses and hoping to be either the new, let's say, I don't know, the new popular food chain or the new Facebook or the new Uber or anything like that?
Yes, I'm 100% in belief of that. My son is now working on a product. I shouldn't tell you too much about it, but it involves virtual reality.
Right. Yeah, that's like a hot topic, right?
About it. Very hot topic. But the principles, the way that you set your business up, the way that you plan it, the way you pursue it, yeah, the technology is totally different from me. And the reason that I didn't continue in my business, quite honestly, is that as the big stores like Target and Walmart took over all the mom and pops that I sold to, that kind of ended my business. And the few people that had access to those big accounts, that was over my head. I couldn't supply, people love my product. I'd go to see buyers at like Target and they say, yeah, this is great, but I need about 300 square feet and yours is like 2 square feet. I never went for the volume. I tried to keep it to quality. So the technology changed in my business as well as the computer came around and people are sending cards through the internet. And so the technology changed in my particular case, but in my son's case, or anybody starting a business today, the technology is different. So maybe your marketing is a little different, but the concept's exactly the same. Make a plan, make your projections, simple, basic business. And then find, I think everybody's creative. I think a lot of people don't realize they're creative. If you can't draw a picture, they think they're not creative. But I think there are ways to be creative in every business. And You just have to find it. So, for example, if you have a product in virtual reality, you have to know that the competition is so immense out there. There's so much competition. Find your niche. Find your way to be creative within your own business.
Right.
But yeah, I ramble on, but
no, that's great.
You're exactly right. The same things that made my products work as far as what you have to do to get your business started are the same today. Technology or the tools might be different, but the concept's exactly the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just going back a little bit to something that we jumped over and skipped, or I mean, we dug into a little bit. But I'm curious, and I think not only am I curious, but I know like some of the people that listen to this podcast do work in advertising. And I'm just curious, even though I don't know how long you spent in the ad agency and the creative department, but being there at that time in the 60s and where they were doing these kinds of like really creative pieces of work for Volkswagen, I don't know, it didn't sound like you were doing, I don't know, I'm just curious how it was like to be in that creative environment at that time. And I don't know, as you said you were bored, but I'm just curious, yeah, how was it basically?
Yeah, I think if you were fortunate, and now again, I graduated with a lot. I went to University of Illinois, which at the time was one of the top advertising schools.
Okay.
And so I worked with a lot of people that I stayed in touch with. The most creative never had a chance to use their creativity right away. It took years. And I guess that was I don't want to say it's my problem. I never had the patience for it. When they put me into this job, as an advertising coordinator, to me, a fifth grader could have done what I was doing, and I just didn't have the patience. I was young and in a hurry to succeed, whatever that meant. And so, had I been more creative in figuring out the next Coca-Cola product or the next ad campaign for a new car, I have a feeling I'd still be in that industry because I find it extremely challenging and fun and extremely creative, and it was really something that tested your skills. So. I have to be honest, I never really got into that. Okay. I did for a short stint, did work for an advertising company, a small advertising agency. And every time I would try to get creative, they would put me into the sales area. They said, no, you're too good with people. People like you, and it sort of took me many years to realize that I'm a pretty good salesman. I always stayed away from that word, but I found out that that's what I was. Yeah. Even when I did my products, my greeting cards and all of those products, I was the one that would talk to the buyers because I was so excited about my product. That enthusiasm worked. And people said, oh, my God, you're a great salesman. I said, no, I'm not a salesman. I just talk about the product. It took me many, many years to realize, well, wait, you are a salesman. That's what sales is, So I kind of fell into that.
Yeah, that's great. Isn't it funny that there's a negative connotation to saying you're good at sales, except not for everybody, but some people have no problem with it. But particularly when you start talking creative industries, it feels like, oh, there's something maybe, I don't know, pure or something like that about creativity that it shouldn't be linked to sales, except that, we've got to be able to make a living. And particularly in the area of advertising, it's interesting that like it is all sales. That's what the job is. Creativity is in service of selling a product or a service.
It really is. And, it's interesting you're saying that because I grew up with some cousins, or I should say an uncle and a cousin that were in the car business. Okay. And they were salesmen. So I didn't like the connotation. I didn't like, I didn't want to be like them. Like, somebody comes into, for whatever it is, and they're going to talk them into buying a car. That's not what that's what I thought sales was, somebody that'll sell anybody anything, take advantage of them, cheat them.
Yes.
I don't like to use that, but that's what I thought sales was. So I always stayed away from that concept.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be what you just talked about and being passionate about a product and talking about that product and service.
Yeah, my brother, who was 4 years younger than I was, so he was like 19 at one point when our business was really thriving, and he would always take me with him to talk to the buyers, and he would, I say figuratively, he would grab my shirt, okay, you talked enough, and pull me away and let him close the deal. But people, definitely the enthusiasm that you have is contagious, I think. And so if you have something you believe in, and I guess maybe that is basic sales today, but we have such a negative connotation. It's sort of like saying you're a lawyer and everybody says, oh my God, what a horrible profession. And obviously there's a lot of good lawyers, and when you need one, they're probably important to have. But it was the same thing with sales. Sales today is not that way, the way it used to be. At least I don't think it is.
So you had your business for a while, and you had a lot of different innovations and products and success around that. And then I believe you started working for Disney at some point.
Well, when my business really got to a point, I'm not going to go into all the details, but we got to a point where I saw the handwriting on the wall. The business is not going to be what it was because so many stores were closing up around the country. You used to go to a city and sell 200 major accounts, or what we called major accounts, 200 really cool stores, very boutique-y kind of clever stores. And you'd go back to that same city a couple of years later, there's 3 stores left. The market was just gone.
Right.
So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And fortunately, I'd made a lot of money. And Disney contacted me and said, the president of films knew my products, and he hired me to come to Disney. And as much as I was excited, oh my God, the idea of working for a movie company was exciting. I didn't let him know that. But inside, I felt like a kid, wow, I'm going to go out to the movie studio, and that's renegotiated. But I wasn't quick to do it because, to be honest, I was a little afraid. I'm not a good corporate guy.
Yeah.
There's no trap. If there's a thought in my head, it comes right out of my mouth. And I don't. To this day, I'm not very good at playing politics, and that is one of my. I guess one of the things I probably could improve upon, but I accept who I am. It's just who I am. So I went to work for Disney after about 6 months of negotiating, and finally said, okay, what am I going to do? And we created a department called Strategic Alliance. We actually created the name, and I believe there's other studios now that have that name or that department. We were the first ones to come up with the name. And it was the idea. They literally opened a door for me to a gigantic empty space and said, create a department. Just find creative ways or clever ways to market films. So
that was the assignment. Find clever ways to market films.
Build a department and find clever ways to market films.
That's pretty broad and it sounds very exciting.
It was extremely exciting. I loved it. I love challenges. And the first thing I did, I knew the power of Disney. That was an exciting thing. When you have a little boutique company like I used to have, trying to get to a buyer at a major store was a difficult task.
Yes.
Not so when you're Disney. Everybody answers the phone. Everybody wants to work with Disney. And one of the first things I did was go to McDonald's. Again, I learned the business a little bit, but within 6 months, probably 3 months, I went to McDonald's. I was on that private Disney jet and went to Chicago.
What time of year was this? What time?
Oh,
what year kind of thing?
It was, my goodness, I'm terrible at this. I would say it was probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
20 years ago. And, gosh, it goes by quickly.
It does.
We were doing movies like, I could tell you better by the films that we were working on.
Perfect.
We were doing, Little Mermaid was coming out, and the one with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, if you recall that one.
Yes, I do, very much so. That was late 80s. That's a fantastic movie.
Just a little aside thing. Disney was so proud of the fact when I started there that they didn't use computer art at all for their films, and Roger Rabbit cost them a fortune, literally a fortune, to do that one, and it was the last one that they did without using computers. So they quickly jumped on the new technology as well. But anyway, that was around the time, and try to make a long story short, which is difficult for me, but
no, it's fine. We have time.
My name is on the original contract with McDonald's and Disney, where we agreed to have them promote films where they would do their Happy Meal, for example, and we would do 3 or 4 a year. But as the relationship matured quickly, they did so many more things than they were supposed to because it's a perfect fit. McDonald, the kids, I think the percentage was something like 96% of every visit to a fast food for a family was determined by the kids. So 96%.
So
actually,
let me stop you for just 1 second, and I want to dig into this because this is really, really interesting. You started telling me that story a little bit when we first met, and I had just listened to an episode of a podcast called The History of Fun, put out by a publisher called Polygon. And The History of Fun, there was this episode about the history of the Happy Meal. What I remember from that episode is they were explaining that McDonald's first launched the Happy Meal based on an idea from a McDonald's franchisee somewhere in South America, if I remember correctly. And at first, when they first launched, toys were not very good, basically. They tried a few different things that were kind of educational, and they were not very interesting until this partnership that you're talking about. So did you reach out to them in the first place, or did they reach out to you, or how did that go? If you can talk about it, obviously.
I think it was pretty much where I thought of McDonald's, and I think that the fellow I work with, he says, yeah, and I think that they've been reaching out to us as well. So it was an easy meeting. I'd like to take all the credit for it, but I think they had reached out first, perhaps. But nobody had done anything with it.
Yeah.
And so when I went there and we talked about it, it's a perfect match because every time McDonald's would do a promotion, every time they'd hold up a Happy Meal, and by the way, Happy Meals are typically 4 weeks. Every time they would hold up a promotion and show 12 seconds or whatever of the Disney film, that's about $30 million Disney did not have to spend that month in advertising. You can imagine the power of McDonald's. McDonald's, and I have to say this, it was exciting to me because I'd like to think I'm somewhat, adventurous. Disney is an adventurous company. They're very quick to act. McDonald's is the same way from a marketing point of view. So it was a perfect match. So if we had an idea to do something, like at one time later we did, I needed their help in getting some promotion on something, and so they put it as part of their Monopoly game, which, if you know, the Monopoly game is a big part of their promotions. And by McDonald's doing that, or by helping me by putting that in, they made that decision in a matter of days. Whereas you try to do that with another company like Sears at the time, it would take months and months, and by then the promotion was over. So it was fun working with McDonald's, who could make decisions that quickly. They were very aggressive. And they had to be, because every time they do their Happy Meal, most people don't realize the power of McDonald's. But, for example, they do a Happy Meal, and, the millions and millions of pieces that go into the Happy Meal, whether it's, we did a Bambi promotion, whether it's a little statue, a little figurine of Bambi, most people don't realize what that means in production to be able to satisfy 60, 80, 100 million Bambis they'd have to make. Well, it's like Mattel doesn't do this in 10 years, and McDonald's is doing it every single month. So their production became a real headache for them. How do I get our products? When we did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that was a turning point for me personally with my relationship with the guys from McDonald's, the people that I was working with, because they're sitting there, and this is at a time when, and this is the fun part, where you're showing them actually pencils. It's a film, but you're showing them the progression of the film as it was to the moment I spoke to them. I mean, the film wasn't finished, but you're seeing how pencil drawings become colored and into finished art. It's kind of fun. So I'm showing them this film as much as we had it of Roger Rabbit, and they looked at me at the end of it and they said, "What do you really think? Do you think this is a kid's promotion?" And, like I say, I wasn't playing politics. I said, this may cost me my job, but no, I don't. I think it's too mature for the little kids, because if you recall, Jessica Rabbit was pretty sexy. And anyway, McDonald's loved me after that. And then I said, and this is one of those cases where I said, but you got to help me, because this could mean my job. I got to get this promoted. What can we do? And McDonald's had at the time, I think they still do, what they call adult promotions. And when they use their supersized cups, those are considered for adults, because little kids, it's too much soda for a little kid.
Right.
So they decided to do a supersized adult promotion for me, where we put likenesses of all the different scenes on each cup, come in each week and get this cup. But to give you an idea of the size of McDonald's and what it means, it was a problem. I think McDonald's probably controlled, or I shouldn't say controlled, they were having every single cup company in Northern America, including Canada, producing cups so that they can get their cups. They needed like 1 billion cups made. And people don't realize how powerful that is. But I will tell you one quick aside if we have time for it.
Yeah, we have time.
Again, I wasn't a big shot at McDonald's. I had a big job, but I wasn't one of the movers and shakers that much. I wasn't Jeffrey Katzenberg or Eisner. But at one point, you have to get the artwork for each cup approved. And it's not as simple as just showing it to someone. I had to get it approved by the Disney department, Disney company, for the artwork. And then there were characters in the film. I had to get their approval. That was, I forgot their name. Bob Hoskins was in there, and
yes.
And Judge, forgot his name. Christopher Lloyd. No, Christopher
Walken.
Well, whatever. No, it wasn't Walken.
No?
But anyway, he played Judge Dredd. I had to get his approval. And usually that means going to their attorneys or their agents. I had to get Spielberg's approval because this thing was done in conjunction. Disney did it with Spielberg's company, that film. And so and the director, and half the people are out of the country. Make a long story short, it was a very tedious task getting their approval. And now it came time to get the approval. The final approval came from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the president of films at Disney. I think that was the title. Anyway, it was time to go up to the big office, as they called it, to go see him. And with the head of art, his name was Robert John. I know he passed away. But anyway, I said, Robert, we got to get these approved. Come with me. He was literally this grown man who was probably good for $1 million a year in salary. Was like so afraid to go up to see these guys. But we went up because there was no one else to do it. And I didn't care. But we're in front of them and we say, and Michael Eisner was there. So Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner are looking at the paintings that were going to be the final ones for the cup. And the guy that I'm with, the head of art, literally was shaking. I'm not exaggerating. And he was holding my pant leg as we're standing there, and they're sitting at a desk. Katzenberg sitting at a desk, and Michael Eisner's behind him. And I said, well, we have to get these approved, Jeffrey. And this guy that I'm with is pulling my pant leg, like wants to leave. And Jeffrey, looking at it, he says, well, these are pretty good. But wait a second. I don't think that in the picture, Jessica Rabbit's eyes are really meeting Bob Hoskins' eyes that well, or something like that. And he says, what do you think, to Michael Eisner? And Michael Eisner says, well, yeah, maybe you're right. So Jeffrey Katzenberg throws the artwork at us and says, tell McDonald's to redo it. And the guy that I'm with is ready to pass out. He's so scared, honest to God. And he, okay, let's go. Okay, Jeffrey. And I said, wait a second. You need to understand something. But before I could say anything, I'm hearing, God damn it, can I say God damn it on the podcast?
Yes, that's okay. We have a mature audience. We're fine.
Right. Well, he said worse words than that. You tell McDonald's that we're Disney and blah, blah, blah. I call it an ego tirade. But he went on and on. You tell McDonald's to kiss our butts and we're Disney. And make a long story short, the guy I'm with, I thought was going to have a heart attack. And I just said, look, Jeffrey, there's just one thing. I could tell him that, but you need to understand something. Every single day that we delay on this is a day that the cup companies will lose 1 million, literally 1 million cups a day is what they were doing. I think they had to do like 30, 40 million cups, if I remember correctly. And every day was 1 million cups. That's what we could get. So if we don't approve this, Jeffrey, that's 1 million cups. So what? Who cares, he says. And I said, but for every time they don't have cups in their stores, in the McDonald's franchises, they're not going to put it on the air. So we're going to lose, for every day that it takes, we're going to lose days being on TV, pushing our product, showing our film.
Yes.
And he okay. And he signed off on it. Now, what startled me about corporate America and why I don't like it, the guy I was with was so frightened, literally frightened, that he would have, yes, Jeffrey, it would have gone out, and it would have cost Disney a lot of money. McDonald's didn't care because they could replace it with something else. But this is where egos get in the way and not always doing the right thing. You know what I mean?
This is really interesting, and I personally find it sometimes difficult to figure out when and how to speak up in an environment where a lot of people are saying yes and are concerned or afraid of like people with power. And it's great. It's great to hear you talk about the story and that there's a lot of different ways in which you can talk about it, and that you're talking to somebody who is willing to listen to a reasonable argument as well. Well, it came down to money. Every time, you could be the big guy, but you're going to lose out here. But nobody tells them these things. That's what just, sort of like politics. I honestly, I wanted Disney. I'm like naive and optimistic. I wanted Disney to be this great company that I went in thinking it was, and then when you see these kinds of things, and I realize it's probably normal with every company, but it I don't know, it disillusions me a little bit, and I don't like to see it. I remember when I went to get the contract signed, I get this contract that's like 4 inches thick, dropped on my desk with the instructions, go get this signed by McDonald's. And so I said, okay. And I look it over. And again, I'm not an attorney, but I've been in business for a long time and I've done a lot of products. And I look at it, and I saw one thing that was pretty glaring. So I called the head of the attorneys, which was one of the highest female executives in the movie business at the time, Helene Hahn. And I call her and said, I need to talk to you about the contract. She wouldn't take my call. Now she's a vice president. I wasn't a vice president. I mean, it sounds silly. She wouldn't take my call. This went on for like 2 weeks prior to my going to McDonald's. I finally go up to her office and her secretary says, and acts, very nice. She says, oh, I don't think you should disturb her now. I walk right into her. And here again, I hear this, I call it the ego tirade. How dare you come in, how dare I go into her office? I said, look, Helene, I've been trying to get a hold of you for weeks. I just have one question to ask you. You're asking me to go and deal with McDonald's attorneys. And, I want to make sure that I'm getting this thing right. And again, the swear words came out, God damn it, and if I wanted attorneys there, I would have done it and this and that. And believe me, we've had different people look at this. And by the way, a little aside, when Michael Eisner came, he brought Disney into becoming a huge studio. Yeah. Prior to that, Disney didn't make many films, not successfully for many years. So they know films. I'll grant you that. But I came from a product background, and she's like screaming at me, literally screaming at me, like, how dare you come in here and what is it? What is it? And I said, well, Helene, if you look in the contract, it says that Disney and McDonald's are going to share in the actual premium, as they call it. The thing that, in this case, the little Bambi doll, we're going to share in the cost 50-50. She says, what is so hard to understand? That's ridiculous. Get out of here, something like that. And I said, well, I just have one quick question for you before you kick me out of here. I said, are we paying for that? Are we sharing in that cost at the manufacturing plant in China? Or are we sharing it when it gets to each store in the United States? And she screamed at me, what's the difference? And I knew she didn't know, they didn't know the business. And I said, well, it could be $1.50 an item. Well, when you're talking 50 million items, that's a heck of a lot of money, and but her ego is to give you an idea of what it's like in that world. And again, that could be all corporates for all I know, corporations, but she wouldn't back down. She says, well, all right, here, you take this number and you call it. I'm going to put an attorney on this. If you need him, have him call me. And I get on the plane and I go to McDonald's, and it's me against 4 attorneys sitting across from me. And they're laughing. They said, I can't believe McDonald's Disney should really be kissing you. We couldn't believe that they weren't that they let this go. So once again, it's the kind of situation that if you don't, where egos get in the way of doing what's right or doing what's smart. Right. I didn't mean to, not that I'm so great. I make mistakes too, but I just found that very disillusioning to me. I didn't like that. Yeah. Maybe that's the corporate world. maybe it is. Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly interesting.
Yeah.
And so did that disillusion you sufficiently that at some point how did that finish with Disney?
Yeah, it was coming to an end. Mainly, it really wasn't that so much. My job was working for the film division. What would have been better for me is working for the corporate division, because when I signed with McDonald's, that precluded certain other departments from doing any business with competitors of McDonald's. So, for example, consumer products in Florida may have done or wanted to do a promotion for Snow White with Dunkin' Donuts for $50,000. Well, by having McDonald's sign with me, they couldn't do it. So I became the enemy of a lot of people there. Now McDonald's was way more important than $50,000, but that's beside the point. What really got me out of there was the fact that after McDonald's, there's nothing else to do. I mean, I went after one of the orange juice companies, and I can get us a big cardboard cutout at every single supermarket in America to promote a film. And the people I work for said, nah, we don't need it.
Yeah.
It was because McDonald's is so powerful. And so my job really became administrative, and that's one of my weak spots, not one of my strong spots. So that kind of was the end of it. But nobody that I work with is still there. They all left pretty quickly. So I don't know. It's not as much fun as people think. Maybe certain divisions are, but it's not as much fun as people think.
Yes. It's not a day at Disneyland.
No, it's not a day at Disneyland. Although one day I got to take some of the executives of McDonald's to Disneyland, and we had an armed guard take us in front of all the other people standing in line to let us on anything we wanted. And people were ready to kill us. So that was one good moment. But I have to say, my best moment at Disney, my absolute top, I don't think I've said this to too many people, but when I had the McDonald's people there to show them part of a film, and I go into the theater on the lot, and we're just sitting there, the four of us, and I press the little console button, and I say, all right, roll it, Fred. And that made me feel like $1 million. I have to say, roll it, Fred, like I'm controlling the theater.
That's very cool. That is cool.
Yeah. Very
cool.
Anyway, that's my Disney life.
Excellent. So did you go back into business for yourself afterwards, or?
I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And quite frankly, you talk about luck. In a way, it was luck. One of my daughters, who lives in California, she said that a friend of hers is president of a very large pediatric cancer research foundation, and they're looking to start creating products to help raise money for this organization. It was a good organization. I mean, I researched it. They really help the kids. They work with the kids and raise a lot of money for research. So she said, my daughter said, would you talk to them? I said, sure. So I went to their board meeting, and they said, well, we're thinking of doing products. I said, what kind of products? They weren't sure. Did I have any recommendations? I said, well, I did a lot of greeting cards in my past, and I could certainly work with the kids to do those. And they said, oh, we did greeting cards once a few years ago. And I said, what was your cost? One person said, 78 cents. And somebody else at the same time said, no, it was like $1.12. And somebody else yelled out, no, it's only 60 cents. So I knew they didn't know what they were doing in a nice way. I mean, that wasn't their business. But anyway, they asked if I could help. And for the next 12 years, I worked with these cancer kids. And then literally, I say it was a lucky move, but I got the least amount of money I ever made, but at the same time, it was the best thing I've ever done. I worked with the cancer kids. I'd get them to draw pictures throughout the year. We'd have different events. I got all these kids, some of them very sick, some of them, look like everybody else, but I'd get them to draw pictures. I'd get hundreds and hundreds of pictures, maybe even 1,000. And at the end of the certain period, I would select 24. We turned them into Christmas cards or ornaments, things like that. And I would put the kid's picture on the back of each one. And it was tremendous. I got them into something like 700 supermarkets throughout Southern California. They raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was very gratifying for me.
That's
I love
great.
working with the kids. Yeah, they're very exciting. And
does that program still exist? They
stopped the program. It's too long of a story to tell you why they don't do it, but the president called me up and said, I can't believe that we're not doing this anymore. They're stupid. They're stupid. But they're not doing it. They may go back into it, but they're not doing it. But I moved to Arizona, and this is where I am now. But there was one girl that did a card one year. This is one of my last years. And at the end of the year, they throw a gigantic party for the kids, and this woman comes up. One of the cards was a little girl drew with Santa Claus sitting next to Mrs. Santa Claus, and so one of the things you could do with computers, I moved them closer together, and it looks like they're kissing. And I just said Merry Christmas, and this girl was so excited that her card made the finals. Anyway, at the big celebration at the end of the year, this beautiful family comes up to me, and this woman puts her hand on my arm and said, Samantha didn't make it. She passed away. And her hand's on my arm, and she says, I just want you to know, Jack, that at the very end, she had tubes sticking out of her all over, but she had a pencil in one hand and paper in the other, and she was drawing for Jack. And, you can't put a price on things like that.
No, you can't.
I don't mean to get sentimental, but it meant a lot to me.
I totally understand. And I think actually this is a good point to... I don't think we're going to top that story right now. So, good point to start winding down, I think. I usually finish, unless there's something else that's burning for you, but I usually finish these conversations with, this is a beautiful story, so I didn't want to say anything else about that. No, that's fine. I usually finish these conversations with a few, what I call the cool down questions. Still the Ice Cream for Everyone podcast. So I usually try to ask about ice cream in the first place. And well, it's pretty warm where you are now in Arizona. So do you have a favorite ice cream flavor, or do you eat ice cream at all?
I love ice cream. I shouldn't eat it, but I love ice cream. I have lots of favorites, but I'm really a chocolate kind of a person. So if I can get like a chocolate fudge or something like that, or chocolate swirl, I'm a happy guy.
And
what's your favorite?
My favorite, I have tons, but I usually really like vanilla and cookie dough. That's one of my go-tos. But I am an ice cream freak as well. Like there's tons I really like. Yeah, I do like my sorbets in the summer as well, like mango or like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Mint chocolate chip is one of the ones that is the most popular that comes back in conversations that I have for these recordings.
Yeah, I like that one too. In fact, that might be my favorite, mint chocolate chip. I probably have too many favorites to pick one.
Yes, I have that kind of problem too. All right. Anything that you've been reading or that caught your attention in terms of creative and creativity? It could be anything to do with design or something that you noticed was creative that you'd like to share.
Well, only that I really believe no matter what's happening technologically, because so many of the people my age, and I hit the big 7-0, they think everything's been done. My friends think, you can't do anything. But they thought like that, and the world thought like that back when I created greeting cards. It's like, you can't do that. Everyone's done it. Hallmark's there. What are you doing? I just think that there's always room for being creative. I think it's National Geographic has a special on genius, and they're showing several episodes of Picasso. I've only watched a few, but it got my juices flowing again. It's like he was looking for ways to express himself in ways that weren't done, and it just gets my mind working. Like there are so many things that are happening today. There's room for creativity. There just is. My favorite word is kindness. I think if we could find a way to spread that to people, and I think we're losing that with all the technology that's happening. And maybe there's a way to go back to some basics and just let somebody know something, expressing some kindness. And I don't know what the product is, but I keep looking for it, and I think there's room for it. So maybe it's the clock is going back again. I don't know, or going around again, but or looking forward. I think there's always room for something that people need or people could use or would make them better.
Yeah. That's great.
So,
I think this is a great place to stop, and I'll look up that National Geographic series of documentaries as well about Genius. That sounds really interesting. Well, Mike, Jack, really thank you very much for the conversation. It was really good fun.
Oh, my pleasure, and I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk again.
All right, that's another episode of the podcast wrapping up. Thank you very much for listening. Apologies once again for the quality of the sound. As I said, we had some technical issues and I decided to call Jack directly on the phone. It didn't come out that great. There was a few issues with it, but overall, I think the story was worth it, and I hope you'll agree with me. Hopefully, if you're still listening to this at this particular point, you've agreed and you've listened to the whole thing. I think that's going to be about it for now. We're going to be coming out with another episode very soon. We got Folsom Skis coming out, and I'm working on some updates to my website, but otherwise, if you want to check out the website or previously published episodes, that's at Ice Cream for Everyone, everything spelled out.net. If you want to get in touch, if you have any questions, feedback, anything like that, if you'd like to be on the show, it's Willem, Willem, at icecreamforeveryone.net, or you can find me on Twitter, ICWillem, that's letters I and C for ice cream, Willem, Willem. That's about it. Thank you very much, and I wish you good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of day or night it is for you at the time you're listening to this. Thanks. Bye.